Good Shabbos. I'd like to share with you my remarks I presented this week on an OU Daily Tehillim and Chizuk call. The Torah's messages are eternal. This means two things. For one, the messages are always relevant. But it also means that the Torah's words can have unique relevance based on the context or the time in which they are being read. When we read Parshas Tisa, this week's Torah reading, during a pandemic, there is unique meaning to be found, different from other years. That's why the very first words of the Parsha leap off the page when we read them. Moshe is commanded, Ki sisa es rosh b'nei Yisrael lifkudehem, that when taking a census of the people, v'nasnu ish kofer nafsho, that each should be counted by contributing an atonement in order to avoid v'lo yihyeh vohem negef bifkodosam, that they will not be stricken by a plague when they are counted. We cannot read the word negef, plague, this year without pausing and meditating upon it. What can this pasuk teach us in the midst of a pandemic? Rashi on this pasuk relates the well-known idea from our rabbis that counting people elicits the ayin hara, the destructive force of the evil eye. That is why Hashem commands that Moshe, instead of counting the people directly, he should collect exactly 1/2 shekel from each person, no more, no less, and count those individual contributions instead of the people to obtain a census. While there certainly is a mystical explanation to the concept of ayin hara, a more direct lesson of the ayin hara for counting people is that the danger of a census is reducing people to numbers. Each person is an olam maleh, an entire world. A person cannot be quantified. The ayin hara represents the danger of losing sight of the inherent sanctity and dignity of each individual person. We reached a grim milestone here in the United States recently. 500,000 people have died from the coronavirus. And that number, 500,000, both conveys the enormity of the tragedy and betrays the individuality of each person who was lost. Each person, an entire world, beloved to those who knew him or her. I don't know why Hashem allowed this current plague to transpire, but I do know that the Torah's instructions for how to take a census can help us grow as a community as we look to the days ahead and beyond the pandemic. The Torah says everyone makes a contribution of a machatzis hashekel, a 1/2 shekel. Why the contribution of a coin? Why a contribution of something of value? Because that's how we count everyone without ignoring the individual, by counting each person's contribution. Each person contributing individually towards a unified goal of bringing Hashem's presence to dwell among us. That's how the Torah guarantees no one will be lost in the numbers, by looking at each person's contribution. And that's how we will reinforce and further strengthen our community in the weeks and months ahead. If every individual were to consider what their active contribution to reinvigorating their community could be, what their machatzis hashekel will be, whether it's material support, volunteering, or even just showing up and participating, we can combat the social and spiritual effects of the pandemic on our communities and thrive in ways like never before. In the time of King David, there was a terrible plague that came about because of a census, because they counted the people directly. And the rabbis teach us that it wasn't just the counting that brought about the plague. Instead, the plague came about shelo tavu b'binyan beis hamikdash, because they did not seek to build the temple, a house for Hashem. And this is exactly how we will emerge from this pandemic, by turning our attention to our own mikdash ma'at, our shul that is a microcosm of the Beis HaMikdash. Every one of us has an opportunity to further contribute to our community, to cast their machatzis hashekel in order to sustain the foundation of our community in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Good Shabbos.